In a stunning forest, there was a squirrel named Sniffles who was eagerly returning to his home. He was very hungry and hurried to his kitchen to find something to eat. But as soon as he opened his food storage, his face fell. There was nothing left. "Oh no, I have no food," Sniffles sighed, clutching his empty stomach as it growled loudly. Realizing he had no choice, he decided to go into the forest to search for food. Sniffles walked through the dense forest, his tiny paws rustling the dry leaves on the ground. The trees stood tall around him, their branches swaying gently in the cool evening breeze. Birds chirped in the distance, and the golden light of the setting sun made everything glow. He sniffed the air, hoping to catch the scent of something delicious. His stomach rumbled again, urging him to move faster. Then suddenly, his eyes widened with excitement. Lying on the forest floor was a basket filled with fresh nuts. Sniffles couldn't believe his luck. His face lit up with happiness, and his tail twitched with excitement. "Food!" he exclaimed, running toward the basket. Without hesitation, he grabbed a handful of nuts and stuffed them into his mouth. The rich, nutty flavor made him sigh in relief. His hunger was finally being satisfied. Just as he was about to take another bite, he heard the soft sound of footsteps approaching. He turned around and saw another squirrel standing in front of him. This squirrel, named Whiskers, looked weak and tired. His fur was messy, his eyes held a desperate, pleading look, and his tiny paws trembled as he stepped closer. "Please," Whiskers said in a soft, tired voice. "I have been searching for food all day but found nothing. I am very hungry. Can you share some food with me?" Sniffles frowned and clutched the basket tightly. "No, this is my food," he snapped. "I found it so it belongs to me." Whiskers took another step forward, his paws now clasped together. "I have nothing to eat," he said desperately. "Please, just a few nuts." But Sniffles' face twisted in anger. "I said no," he shouted. "Go find your own food." Whiskers' ears drooped and his eyes filled with sadness. But he was so hungry, he had no strength left to search for food anymore. He fell to his knees and begged Sniffles, his paws raised in desperation. "Please, I am starving. Just a little bit of food." Sniffles, growing irritated, scowled. Instead of feeling pity, he threw a handful of nuts at Whiskers. The nuts hit Whiskers on the head, making him flinch. Shocked and hurt, he slowly stood up, realizing Sniffles would never share with him. With a heavy heart and an empty stomach, Whiskers turned away and walked deeper into the forest, disappearing among the trees. Sniffles huffed and went back to eating. "Good, now I can eat in peace," he muttered. Days passed. Sniffles lived happily in his home, enjoying the food he had found. He felt no remorse, believing that he had only done what was necessary to survive. But one day, he found himself in the same situation, hungry, with no food left in his kitchen. "Oh no, not again," he groaned, clutching his empty stomach. Once again, he had no choice but to go back to the forest to find food. However, when he arrived, he was met with a terrible sight. A heavy storm had hit the forest recently. Many trees had been knocked down. The beautiful, thriving forest now stood eerily silent. Towering trees, once lush and full of life, now stretched their bare branches toward the sky like skeletal fingers. The ground, which had once been rich with fallen fruit and acorns, was now littered with dry leaves, their brittle edges crunching beneath Sniffles' tiny paws. The wind whistled through the empty branches, carrying with it a hollow whisper, as if the forest itself mourned its loss. The air smelled of decay, a stark contrast to the fresh scent of pine and earth that had once filled Sniffles' home. With his heart pounding in his chest, Sniffles darted between the roots of the trees, his sharp eyes scanning every nook and cranny. He overturned fallen twigs, peeked into hollowed-out logs, and even dug into the soil with his tiny claws, hoping to uncover something, anything, to eat. But no matter where he searched, there was nothing. No berries clinging to bushes. No forgotten nuts buried in the ground. No scraps left behind by other animals. It was as if the forest had been stripped clean, leaving only hunger in its wake. His stomach twisted painfully, a dull ache that grew sharper with every passing moment. He had never known true hunger before, not like this. A deep, empty gnawing that refused to be ignored. His limbs trembled, not just from exhaustion but from the creeping realization that he might not find anything at all. Desperation clawed at his mind. He climbed a nearby tree, scaling its rough bark with swift but shaky movements. From the top, he scanned the horizon, his heart sinking as he saw nothing but more bare trees, their emptiness stretching for miles. Sniffles swallowed hard, his throat dry. His ears twitched, listening for any sign of movement, perhaps another squirrel, a bird, a rustling bush that might lead him to food. But the forest was quiet. Too quiet. Panic surged through him. He had always been able to find food before. He had always been quick.
In the distance, Sniffles saw movement. His tired eyes focused, and his heart gave a weak but hopeful flutter. A figure was walking toward him, stepping carefully over the brittle leaves and fallen twigs. As the figure came closer, Sniffles' breath caught in his throat. His eyes widened in disbelief. It was Whiskers. The same squirrel he had turned away just days ago, refusing to share even a single nut. Sniffles could still remember the look of desperation on Whiskers' face, the way his shoulders had sagged with disappointment before he walked away, empty-pawed. Now, Whiskers stood before him, and in his arms was a large bag, a bag full of nuts. Sniffles' empty stomach twisted in agony. His legs felt weak beneath him. After a long stretch of hopelessness, a new feeling stirred within him, hope. Maybe this was his chance. Maybe, despite everything, someone would help him now. Summoning the last of his strength, Sniffles pushed himself up and stumbled forward. His head hung low, his tail dragged behind him. He felt small, ashamed, unworthy. When he reached Whiskers, he hesitated before speaking. His throat was dry, but he forced out the words anyway. I am so sorry, he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. I should have helped you before. I was selfish and unkind. But now, his voice cracked, and he swallowed hard. Now, I am the one who is starving. Please, can you share some food with me? Whiskers remained still. His grip on the bag of nuts tightened slightly, but his face gave nothing away. A long silence stretched between them. Then, Whiskers exhaled slowly. His expression didn't soften. You refused to share with me when I was hungry, he said, his tone calm but laced with disappointment. Now, it is my turn to do the same. The words hit Sniffles harder than he expected. His chest tightened as if the air had been knocked out of him. So this was what it felt like. To be turned away. To be helpless. The sharp pain of hunger was nothing compared to the deeper ache of regret. Please, Sniffles begged, his paws trembling as he clasped them together. I know I was wrong. I should have helped you. I see that now. If I ever get another chance, I will always share. Just this once, can you forgive me? For a moment, it looked like Whiskers might say something else. His tail twitched, his ears flicked. But then, he sighed and shook his head. You had a chance to be kind, and you chose not to be, he said quietly. Now, you will know what it feels like to be left hungry and helpless. Without another word, Whiskers turned and walked away. Sniffles watched in despair as his only hope disappeared into the distance, carrying the bag of nuts with him. His stomach growled, but the ache in his heart was far worse. Slowly, he sank to the cold ground, wrapping his arms around himself. The wind howled through the empty trees, a chilling reminder of how alone he truly was. He had done this to himself.
Each step deeper into the forest felt heavier, his body weak, his heart burdened with regret. He could only hope that someday he would get the chance to prove that he had truly changed. Until then, hunger and regret would be his only echoes.